Hey, Mike.
Morning, how are you, mate?
I'm well. How are you?
Marvellous, thank you.
That's good. Morning, everyone. All set? Very good. Well, today we have 5 new cases of COVID-19 in Queensland, but they are all returned travellers in hotel quarantine. 1 had returned from Afghanistan via Dubai, and 4 in one family that had returned from Iraq, again via Dubai. We do have 1 new case in the community that tested positive in New South Wales, and therefore will be reported in New South Wales's numbers. They were tested on the 12th of July because they were a close contact. They'd been notified by New South Wales Health that they were a close contact. The details of what happened from then are a bit complicated, and I'm sure more details will come to light, and Dr. Young will outline this in more detail. It does appear that from that point, on the 12th of July, they should have been in isolation, and because they were in Sydney, they should have been locked down. It does also appear, though, that there was a lab error in the initial reporting of their test results. They flew from Sydney to Ballina on the 14th of July on flight VA1139. New South Wales Health is responsible for contact tracing all of the other passengers on that flight. They were then collected from Ballina Airport by the flight attendant that we reported positive in Queensland on Friday. She picked up that passenger from Ballina Airport and drove him back to Queensland. So it does appear that the flight attendant we reported on Friday caught COVID from the passenger on this flight to Ballina. Therefore, we would consider that the index case for this outbreak. Because that was the 14th of July, it means we're no longer concerned about those flights on the 12th and 13th of July, nor especially concerned about the risk in Gladstone, Longreach or Hervey Bay. That would now be a similar risk to the rest of the state, and Health will advise those passengers who had been in isolation of that outcome and those arrangements. Both cases, though, both these positive cases have been active in and around Brisbane and the Gold Coast. More locations were identified yesterday, and they've been put on the health website, and we may well expect more in coming days. But it underlines that the risk in Brisbane and the Gold Coast in particular remains very, very real. The wearing of masks continues to be incredibly important, and we just urge everyone in Brisbane and the Gold Coast to keep an eye on the alerts that Queensland Health issues. That brings us to 1,770 total cases, 26 of those active, 12,763 tests in the last 24 hours, 8,388 vaccines by Queensland Health in the last 24 hours, 2,078,672 total vaccines in Queensland. I just want to touch briefly on the announcement by the Prime Minister this morning regarding vaccine availability in 2022 and 2023. Another vaccine announcement from the Morrison government. I think it's disappointing that we're talking about still importing these vaccines in 2 years' time. 12 months ago we were told it would take too long to get a local vaccine manufacturing capability. And now it seems they're saying it would take too long, even though we are placing orders for 2023. And so I would just urge the Commonwealth Government to work with us on our plans to get local vaccine manufacturing so that we can make these vaccines right here in Australia. We'd love to make them right here in Queensland. I want to take a moment to congratulate James Martin on his victory in the Stretton by-election yesterday. It's a credit to him, to his lovely family, to his hard-working team of volunteers. They ran a fantastic campaign and they secured a great result. It further honours the memory of our great mate Duncan Pegg, and I want to thank the Pegg family for what they did to support James throughout the campaign, even while they were still grieving. I think the sky-written heart above Stretton yesterday was just such a fitting and touching tribute. None of that takes away, though, from what James and his team have achieved. They ran a great campaign. He'll be a passionate advocate for that community. And to James, I'd just say, see you at caucus, mate. On the result, though, I find myself in the uncomfortable position of agreeing with Campbell Newman. This was an awful result for the LNP. governments expect swings against them at by-elections. I think the average swing against a government is in the order of 5%, but sometimes 10, 13. I think Campbell Newman even recorded a swing of 17% against him in a by-election. And this is in a situation where not just are we the incumbent government, but we lost a very, very popular local member who had over 4 elections built his own personal vote. And I just note that while we were all in Stretton talking to people about how we're keeping Queenslanders safe and getting on with the economic recovery, the LNP was talking about themselves, focused on themselves at their party conference. And finally, I'd like to wish our Premier a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Annastacia. Thank you for keeping us safe, and I hope you are having a safe flight and are able to recover somewhat in hotel quarantine.
Thank you, Acting Premier. So 5 new cases in Queensland overnight, all in hotel quarantine, all overseas acquired. Then a case that was detected in New South Wales travelled into Queensland while infectious on the 14th of July. So that person is a close contact and I believe is the index case for our Qantas flight crew member who we notified as positive on the 23rd of July. So it's clear that those 2 people now have been out and about in Brisbane and the Gold Coast since the 14th of July. So I ask anyone in Brisbane or the Gold Coast who's got any symptoms at all, it is critical you come forward, because I'm not actually sure where those 2 individuals have been while they've been in their infectious period. But I can be reasonably confident now that prior to the 14th of July was not a risk. So therefore those 6 flights that flew to regional Queensland are not a risk. And anyone who was required to quarantine from being on those flights, I thank you very, very much for your cooperation and all the tests that were done, but you are now able to leave quarantine. That's not to say that there isn't a risk across the whole state, because 14th of July is a while ago now, and people could have been out and about in Brisbane or the Gold Coast, come into contact with one of these 2 individuals, become infected and then travelled home anywhere in Queensland. So the risk across all of Queensland stands. Please, anyone with any symptoms at all, come forward and get tested immediately, and that will help all of us manage these risks from the pandemic. So as we go forward, there are ongoing restrictions across Queensland in terms of density, in terms of gatherings, and also for the 11 LGAs down in the southeast corner, please continue to wear masks. It's great to be out and about seeing people wear masks. That's really important. So wear masks. If you're sick, stay at home and get yourself tested as soon as possible. And it's those things that will keep us all safe. Thank you.
Well, happy birthday, Premier, and congratulations to James Martin on his win and becoming the new member for Stretton. I look forward to working with him as our new parliamentary colleague. It is good news for those people who are on those 6 flights to Longreach and Gladstone and Hervey Bay. But of course the message remains for all people in Queensland: if you are unwell, please stay home and get tested and await your results. Of course, we still have all those people who are isolating, aside from those off these 6 flights, from previous close contacts, and you must continue to remain isolated. Our focus now is Brisbane and Gold Coast, and we ask anyone with the mildest of symptoms in Brisbane or the Gold Coast to please come forward and get tested. We have testing clinics open on the weekends as well. Also, some of our private pathologists are open on weekends. So jump on the Queensland COVID website and you'll be able to find out where you can get tested. But if you are unwell today, don't wait till tomorrow. Please go out and get tested, because we do know these 2 individuals have been out in the community since the 14th, and we are still trying to identify and verify exactly where all these people have been. So again, we ask anyone in Queensland particularly if you have been in Brisbane or the Gold Coast at any point since the 14th, to keep checking the Queensland COVID website for exposure sites, because it's very important that we will continue to provide information and update that site as information becomes available. And I thank the media who have continued to promote and advertise any new sites that have occurred throughout the evening last night and into this morning. So please be checking those sites at least once a day if you've been in Brisbane or the Gold Coast. But remember, social distancing, wearing masks particularly, it is mandatory in those 11 LGAs in southeast Queensland still, and good hygiene, and just making sure that you are staying home if you're unwell. Thank you.
So we have seen a fairly significant operational response over this weekend in a variety of areas. Obviously with the hard border closures, we've seen increased interceptions there, where we intercepted 3,003 vehicles yesterday, turned around 64 and put 2 persons into quarantine. At our domestic air borders, 895 passengers were processed, 4 refused entry and 276 placed into quarantine, so obviously that number has increased. We saw 152 international arrivals. There was protest activity obviously yesterday which got some attention. That adds to our operational overlay. We are currently reviewing that to see whether any further action needs to be taken, but overall it was a very peaceful rally. People were fairly compliant, although there was some persons not wearing masks, which we will review. We did hand out 51 masks yesterday as well, and overall that, we only had to take enforcement action on one occasion, and that related to a person in hotel quarantine in Brisbane attempting to leave via a fire escape, but was caught. So they faced a $1,300 fine for that. And finally, just to say thank you to the trucking industry for the significant improvement we've seen in compliance with our truck drivers coming into the state. So 315 trucks intercepted yesterday, none turned around, and only 6 didn't have the correct paperwork. So a great improvement. Thank you.
Any questions?
We've been told the Premier is quarantining at an executive suite in the West End. Is she getting special treatment?
She's quarantining in a quarantine hotel room that is just part of the hotel quarantine stock. It has been used by other returning travellers through hotel quarantine.
So she's not getting any special treatment?
She is in one of the hotel quarantine rooms that has been and continues to be used as part of the hotel quarantine program.
This room, however, is it something that is, given privilege to or only access to maybe business leaders and stuff like that? The line is that hundreds of Queenslanders use this room, but is it the same room that any Queenslander could have found themselves in?
Yeah, it is. Any Queenslander could have found themselves in this room or a room like it. So as I said, it appears there may have been a lab error in the initial reporting of the test result, in that they were initially told that they were negative. I understand there was subsequent testing of the sample which came back positive on the 20th. I'll let Dr. Young add to that.
This is very confusing and we're sorting it all out, but this gentleman was a close contact of a known case in Sydney. So he got tested on the 12th of July and it came back positive on the 12th of July, but due to an error in that private lab, he was sent a text message saying it was negative. That actually is irrelevant because he needed to be in quarantine anyway. Remember, you've got 14 days incubation, so he should have remained in quarantine. But anyway, he flew up from Sydney to Ballina on the 14th. And then we became aware of him here because he was a close contact of that Qantas flight crew member, and the police located him and placed him into hotel quarantine here in Queensland on the 21st, and we tested him and that result came back positive late yesterday. So then we went checking with New South Wales and found he'd been tested down there. All of that's being worked through at the moment, but the first we knew he was a concern was late yesterday. So our understanding, but this is all being investigated, our understanding is that the flight crew, the Qantas regional flight crew member, went down to Ballina, which was legal and fine, there was no issue with that, on the 14th, and picked him up. Now, of course, it was illegal for him to have left Sydney to go to Ballina, but the fact she went down to Ballina and picked him up, she was able to do at that stage. The border was not closed. She picked him up and brought him back to Queensland on the afternoon of the 14th. That's part of the investigation that police will be doing with New South Wales.
Does the flight attendant provide any explanation for those away?
Well, I don't know when she got symptoms and what got her to get tested, but I'm glad, very glad that she came forward on the 21st and got tested then, and we found she was positive. And she's been working with us in terms of all of the venues that she's been at, and you will have seen all of those venues up on our website. So anyone who's been to any of those venues of concern, it is really important you get tested and that you isolate yourself until told you don't need to by Queensland Health. Some of those venues we've deemed as very low risk, for instance Dreamworld, so you don't need to isolate, but please, if people just check the website. Everything? All done?
Anything else? Very good.
Everyone's too cold.
Thank you all.